Hello and welcome to the channel's book club. We are looking at two different sides of the writing coin today. In our first segment, we'll be hosting two distinguished creative writers and considering a few matters related to creative writing. In the other, we'll be talking to an expert on the merits of motivational and self-help books. Two exchange partners in the Commonwealth Poetry United project joined us to discuss their experiences and share their thoughts. Tom Paul is a Scottish poet and fiction writer who is currently Honorary Senior Research Fellow at Glasgow University and also a lecturer on Lancaster University's Distance Learning Masters in Creative Writing program. Tolu Ogunlesi is a journalist, poet, fiction writer, and photographer who lives in Lagos, Nigeria. His poetry collection, Listen to the Geckos Singing from a Balcony, was published in 2004. Tom has been busy during his stay in Nigeria. We'll show you a bit of his involvement while in the country.
This is a poem called This is Lagos. A feather of blood seeped unannounced into your brain. No one could catch it. No one could smooth it back into the flow of service. It took with it, tiny as it was, a quarter of your world. Of course, I could not leave you then, but I was too far gone already to stay. So, this is Lagos. The tepid air is layered and vegetal. So many flowers I peer through them to watch the TV. Our cat samples their waters as if they were the finest malts. Each night, whole families pour into Lagos, drifting up the nip and makeshift skiffs, or threading their way over the smallest roads that lead from the impoverished south. They camp under bridges, washed by grey light, or in our driveways and doorways, huddling against unfamiliar chills. But by morning, when I go for my paper, they have melted into the gunmetal dawn. No one rests if he wants to eat in Lagos. I read because I've been spared all the reasons others can't read. Among them, poverty, hunger, war, prejudice, negligence, closing libraries as if their job is somehow done, or taking small, hesitant children whose light vowels contain more pain than we can imagine and testing them close to destruction. I read because words can dance. I read because words make maps that show me where I am, where I have been, and where I want to go. I read because if language is a landscape, books are the road I have taken. I read because each peach, pear, plum, 4 words that together form a perfect archive of love and memory. I read to make sense of, to empathize with, to self-nourish. I read because I need companions. I read because we read. I read because I need to reread. I read to pay attention, for there are evil books, slack books, shallow books, exploitative books, as many kinds of book as there are people, and we need to know them too.
Now, Tolu, you are hosting Tom in Nigeria for the Commonwealth Poets United Exchange Program. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, so, this year there was the Commonwealth Games in Scotland, in Glasgow, which of course, we lost to Glasgow. Abuja and Glasgow were the finalists for hosting this in 2007, I believe. Glasgow, won the bid. So as part of
You're not still bitter.
no,
You've got over that, surely.
no, we've got over that
Okay.
now. Yeah. And so as part of the Commonwealth Games, this Commonwealth Poets Exchange is part of the culture component of the Commonwealth Games. So that whilst there's the sporting competition, which many people are familiar with, there's running alongside it is also something like a culture element. Not so much a contest as much as a collaboration, and it involves 6 Scottish poets and 6 Commonwealth poets paired. Scottish poet and Commonwealth poet. So I am the poet from Nigeria. I've got colleagues from Canada, New Zealand, Jamaica, India, yeah. And so the Commonwealth poets have all gone to Scotland to spend time with our exchange partners. And the Scottish poets are also supposed to visit the Commonwealth countries of their exchange partners. So I was in Scotland in May, and actually at the end of July as well. And so, it's this is Tom's opportunity to pay me back in kind and visit, and for me to host him and just show him, life in Lagos, in Nigeria, give him a sense of Nigeria, just as he gave me a sense of life in Scotland. Yeah.
Sounds like a very interesting program. Tom, what's poetry like in Scotland? Can you give us a sense of... I know the poetry community in Nigeria is it's getting more and more vibrant, more and more interesting. What's it like in Scotland?
Well, I think I can say that poetry is very important in Scotland, and you'll know, of course, we've just had an election, a referendum, and one of the reasons that we had that referendum historically is that it's been Scottish writers that have given Scotland a sense of itself and a sense of its identity and asserted its identity as an independent country. So, Scottish writings is held in high regard in Scotland, and poetry is an essential element of that literary culture.
You teach creative writing. How much of Nigerian creative writers have you read? And if you have, how would you compare what you've seen in Nigeria with what goes on back there, out there in Scotland?
It's very. I think these kinds of things are very hard to say, because it's like there's the when you think of the number of books from one country that actually make it over to another country, and I think that's especially true with poetry, which is famously uncommercial, so it doesn't move across. Tolu and I were talking this morning. I saw an interview with Chimamanda Adichie, and we're talking about how important it is to have like a flagship book, that is very successful and very available, and because people look at that book or look at that author and say, well, there must be other things that are happening. That author didn't just invent herself. There must have been support around her. There must be other writers around that are interesting too. And so I read, Tolu recommended books for me, and I read some other writers as well. And I'm very impressed with the liveliness of the writing, with the reach of the writing, with the concerns of the writing. The reach, there's a bigness, there's a scope to Nigerian writing. I think probably because, there are many issues here, just like we were talking about rising population, a kind of incipient violence that's happened that gets a world attention, and the wealth this huge wealth, the richest country in Africa. I mean, these are big themes, and going alongside that, I mean, one of the reasons that Tolu and I are an interesting pairing is that the last project that I worked on was concerning dying villages in Europe, because Europe is becoming incredibly underpopulated, and there are villages that are dying all over Europe at a terrific rate. And of course, Nigeria has this growing population, and also, you know, I think in it was 3 years ago or something, for the first time in human history, more people lived in cities than lived in the country. And so these tensions, I think, are evident in Nigeria, aren't they, with a regional, local, oral society, and this very thrusting society that Lagos has.